Ever get that feeling? Like you watch a live stream, learn a ton, really insightful stuff, but then later you check out the replay, maybe an audio version, and it just kind of falls flat.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that energy, the main points, they get kind of lost in the transition from, live to just audio.
Yeah, it happens all the time, right? And it makes you wonder why. Like, what's going on there? How come it doesn't translate? And is there anything we can do about it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to look at today. We're diving into this whole idea of how to take a live stream, all that energy and those random tangents, and turn it into a really focused, engaging audio experience.
A podcast, basically.
Yeah, like a podcast. And to do that, we've got this live stream that we're going to unpack where they actually talk about this very process, this conversion process. Very meta, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is to figure out how to pull out the best stuff and turn it into something you can actually listen to and get value from.
Yeah.
And we'll even touch on how AI tools are playing a role in this, the whole prompt engineering thing.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's do it. So right off the bat, the source, live stream we're talking about, it really hits on a core problem. Taking a live stream, just the raw recording, and trying to make it a podcast often doesn't really work. It misses the mark.
Yeah. Misses the mark big time.
Like you said, it's like that magic of being there live just doesn't automatically transfer over.
Like something gets lost in translation.
Right. It can feel all over the place, like a rambling conversation.
Yeah.
Not really zeroing in on what's important, And for listeners, it's like, well, I get the general idea, but I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to take away from this.
Exactly. So the source gets more specific and brings up some examples from this app-a-day live stream. There were a couple of projects, right? The first one was this micro app manager, which was all about building a list of applications.
Like as you're making them?
Yeah, like a running list of the apps you've created.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty useful.
And then there was this video recording name sequence app. It was designed to, organize video content with chapters and labels and even help you set up the underlying code structure.
Yeah, that sounds really helpful, especially if you're creating a lot of video content.
Right. And here's the thing. The source really emphasizes that these live streams, they weren't all smooth sailing. They talk about running into bugs and stuff, especially with Replit, this online coding platform. And also just keeping everything in sync, like the coding environment, was apparently a challenge.
Okay, so bugs and syncing issues. And this is where it gets interesting for us, right? Because the idea for the podcast isn't just to rehash how they built the app, like a step-by-step tutorial.
Right. It's more about the challenges, the problems they ran into, and how they dealt with them.
Exactly. It's about the process, the troubleshooting. Because honestly, that's where the real learning happens. Right? I mean, think about it. When you're trying to learn something new, it's the mistakes, the things that go wrong, and then how you fix them. That's the stuff that really sticks with you.
Totally. And the source actually contrasts this with some of the earlier podcast attempts, where they just took the raw live stream and tried to make it into something listenable. They mentioned using a tool called Notebook LM, and they did a little bit of prompt engineering, but it still wasn't quite there.
And they give some examples of those early attempts, like the opening lines. It's stuff like, have you ever opened up a folder on your computer and it's just like, it's super casual, very stream of consciousness.
It's like you're just eavesdropping on someone's thought process.
Which is fine for a live stream,
Yeah.
But as a polished podcast, it kind of falls short.
Right. It needs more structure, some kind of narrative arc.
And the source actually brings up a better example, a podcast called Cozy Cafe, which they did for this feastless YouTube channel, AI TLDR. And this podcast actually had intros and outros, so it felt a lot more intentional, like someone put some thought into how it flowed.
A more curated experience.
Yeah, exactly. So the big takeaway here is that a good podcast isn't just a replay of the live stream. It's not a verbatim transcript.
It's about distilling the essence, the core insight.
Yeah, and shifting the focus. It's not just about what happened. It's about the why and the how. What were the challenges? What were the lessons learned? That's where the real value is.
That's the gold right there.
Now, the source also brings up this issue of, AI-generated content sometimes sounding a bit robotic, a bit unnatural. They talk about overusing names and brands, like mentioning the creator's name, Appy Dave, constantly.
It sound like a sales pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Appy Dave did this, Appy Dave said that. And they compare it to, like, a conversation between Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. Elon Musk is obviously the guest, but they don't have to say his name every other sentence.
It's understood.
Right. The conversation flows naturally.
Yeah.
So how do you avoid that over-mentioning problem?
Well, they introduced this concept of a podcast briefing engine. It's like a pre-production stage where you create a focus brief before generating the actual podcast.
So you're not just feeding the AI the entire raw transcript.
No, you're being selective. You're pulling out the good stuff, refining it, making sure it's relevant for a podcast audience. And to do that, they talk about using tools like Whisper AI to transcribe the audio, and then it's all about
Prompt engineering.
Exactly. You got to give the AI the right instructions to get the output you want.
So how does that work in practice? Like, how do you figure out those key talking points?
So they give this example of a 30-day challenge with Replit. And imagine you want to make a podcast out of it. So your initial really broad talking points might be productivity, automation, assisted development.
Okay, makes sense. Broad strokes.
Yeah, and then you're thinking, okay, who's my audience? Developers, business owners, entrepreneurs, maybe. But then you realize you can actually get more specific. You can refine both the talking points and the target audience.
So you're not trying to be everything to everyone.
Right. And in this example, they decide to really hone in on business owners and entrepreneurs. Because even though Replit is a coding platform, it's got these no-code and low-code features that make it super accessible to people who don't actually code.
So you can automate tasks, build simple apps, without needing to know a ton of code.
Exactly. So the podcast becomes much more targeted, much more valuable to that specific audience.
It's about thinking, okay, what's going to resonate with these people? What are their pain points? What are their goals?
And then you use that to shape the content.
Now, the source also mentions this prompt. What talking points to focus on? What's the deal with that?
So that's your filter, your synthesizer, you've got all these initial ideas, right? And this prompt helps the AI narrow them down. It filters out the noise, the stuff that's not really important, merges related ideas, and just makes the whole thing more concise.
So it's like a refinement process.
Yeah, you're taking this big, messy live stream and you're extracting the essence, the good stuff.
And then there's this whole idea of hidden gems. What do they mean by that?
Okay, so these are those unexpected but potentially super valuable insights that might come up in the live stream, like something that wasn't the main focus, but it sparks an idea, you know?
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
They mentioned someone talking about using ChatGPT for task research. Now, that wasn't the main topic, but it's a really interesting concept, right? Like using AI to help you learn more effectively.
So you could potentially build a whole podcast episode around that one idea.
Absolutely. And that's the thing with live streams. There's often these little nuggets of gold hidden in there. You just got to find them.
And then they talk about creating insightful questions. Why is that important?
Okay, so imagine you're interviewing the person who hosted the live stream. You don't just want to ask surface level questions, right? You want to dig deeper, get them to really elaborate on their ideas.
So it's about crafting questions that will elicit more detailed, more insightful answers.
Exactly. And they give this example, a question about the ChatGPT thing, like, can you walk us through how you use it for task research? What kind of impact has it had? Those kinds of questions will get you much richer answers, which is what you as a listener really want.
Makes sense. So what were the main focus points they came up with for the podcast?
They landed on 3 key areas. First, the idea that anyone can use simple prompts to automate tasks. This really ties back to that business owner, entrepreneur audience, right? Second, exploring the differences between working with an AI versus a human programmer, which is a really interesting topic.
Super timely, too.
And then finally, the importance of keeping your prompts concise and focused. That's a big one when you're working with AI.
So you're not just throwing a bunch of random stuff at it, you're being deliberate.
Exactly. You're thinking strategically about what you want the AI to do.
And circling back to that whole over-mentioning thing, they reiterate the importance of introducing names and brands in a natural way. You know, don't just keep repeating them over and over.
Let the conversation flow organically.
And then, last but not least, they talk about calls to action. Why is that important?
Well, you want to give your listeners something to do, right? Like, if they're interested in learning more, how do they take the next step? So they provide some examples like, follow the 30-day challenge with Replit, or check out Replit for your own AI automations. It's about providing clear, actionable next steps.
So it's not just, here's some cool information, bye. It's about guiding the listener on their journey.
Exactly. You're giving them a path to follow.
So it sounds like making a great podcast from a live stream isn't just about recording the audio. It's about really thinking about the listener, about what they're going to get out of it, and then using AI tools strategically to extract the most valuable information, refine it, and present it in a way that's engaging and actionable.
It's a transformation, really. You're taking something that was designed for one medium and you're adapting it, optimizing it for another.
And that's the key, right? It's not just repurposing, it's reimagining.
It's about asking yourself, what's the essence of this content? What's the core message? And how can I best convey that to a podcast audience?
So for all you listeners out there, think about the live streams you watch or even just any kind of longer content you consume. What are those hidden gems of information? What are the key takeaways? And how could you distill those into something more focused, more digestible, more shareable?
It's a good exercise, right? Like, how can you take this information and make it your own? Make it something that you can actually use.
Because there's so much valuable stuff out there. But sometimes it's buried under hours of content. And if we can learn to extract that essence, to refine it, to polish it, well, that's where the real magic happens.
It's like turning a rough diamond into a sparkling gem.
And on that note, like and subscribe to Appy Dave. If you want to work with Appy Dave on workflows, prompt engineering, or understanding AI, visit appydave.com. Link is in the description.